Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us once again for another episode of Property Law Alliance. I am joined this week. Nick is back with us, and Bruno has joined us once again. So we've got two questions today. One will be directed to Bruno. We'll be speaking about OTPs, and the second one will be doing locus standi and the impact of that on transfer over with Nick. So Bruno, specifically with your question, so this is with regards to somebody who's about to purchase a property and they're dealing with the estate agent, right? And unfortunately for them, as we will probably are aware, sometimes estate agents don't give enough background information, and most people buy properties once or twice in their lifetimes, and it's not an everyday thing. So you need as much information as you can because the consequences are lengthy. So maybe tell us what are some of the important informations to know with regards to that, specifically OTPs. So sure. Maybe touch on important clauses in an OTP, some suspensive conditions, and when does an offer to purchase perhaps lapse, and obviously maybe some basic requirements that make an offer to purchase valid. So maybe just give us some route into that.
Cool. So if we look at the concept or the umbrella term of buying a property, it obviously entails quite a bit, right? And it's a whole stage of the process that you need to look into just before you obviously get to the transfer stage where you become owner of the property. So if you start right at the beginning, the first thing to bear in mind is the estate agent does act as a property professional. So when dealing with property practitioners, right, be very careful because there's very good ones out there and there's very bad ones. Same as attorneys, same as any kind of professional, right? But it is incumbent on them to give you a level of education on what exactly you're doing. That's why it's in the professional space. So just bear in mind, when approaching a property professional, you should actually feel comforted that your interests are being looked at and that the process will flow smoothly because this professional is being open and transparent with you. If you do obviously want to understand what the benchmark is, starting right at the beginning, it's the question of approaching the estate agent, having a conversation with them, and starting to look for properties. So as a purchaser, they're going to start giving you a list of properties and they're going to offer to, allow you to view these, right? So from the stage on, you're already engaging in a relationship. So first thing to remember, you've spoken to an estate agent, meaning that if you buy this property, but this very same property that you've been shown, but through another agent, you're going to cause issues, right? So that's the first thing to bear in mind is once you're with an agent, trying to move to another agent to do the exact same deal has repercussions. So first red flag, don't jump between agents and land up on the same property, right? You have to be very open about why you want to change agents. Second thing, viewing the property. I know that it's an emotional experience. You're buying a house, you're buying a home, you seeing your family run through the garden, and it's a beautiful experience for you. Unfortunately, properties are big investments, so I wouldn't just jump the gun and kind of get to that emotional state right off the bat. People buy properties and they land up in very bad scenarios because of the condition of the property. So what do you need to look for? Second red flag is condition. Right? You need to keep your eyes open. You need to walk through that property, open every door, open every cupboard, every tap, switch on every light, look for anything at all. Ask any questions. If things look too clean, ask why does this wall look so clean? If things look like they're cracking and falling apart, ask why. It could be the stupidest question, doesn't matter. It's a big investment for you. On top of that, I'd probably suggest using a professional. If you go view 100 properties, you don't have to use a property inspector on 100. But once you narrow it down to the ones that you really, really, really want, use the property inspector, spend the money, because paying whatever, 4,000 Rand for someone to go there on a property that you're inevitably going to buy is going to save you as opposed to paying 100,000 Rand to try and repair it, right? And with property inspectors, the nice thing is sometimes you can actually use the report to reduce the purchase price. So it's a nice little weapon in your arsenal. So that's number two, condition. Number 2 also links up to number 3, which is making the offer. The condition of the property and things that you want fixed and things that you haven't seen. So remember, the condition of the property is normally accompanied by a mandatory disclosure form, right, that the estate agent has to give you. This is attached to the offer that you're going to make, and that's how they tie in together, right? So the condition of the property, whether you're buying it as is, whether there's certain repairs that need to be effected, whether there's things that weren't disclosed in the mandatory disclosure form, all of these things you need to look out for. And again, not rocket science. It's just about keeping a list of all the issues you've discovered, comparing what's in the mandatory disclosure form, and then asking the question to the agent. His job being, what is going to happen to these? Who's responsible? Be open about it, actually set it out so that you know this is going to be fixed, this isn't going to be fixed, and what happens if it isn't fixed, right? What repercussions do you have? It's a very simple question, because just follow that thought pattern, and it's intuitive, right? In addition to that, making the offer to purchase, there's a couple of very important things. Number 1, you're buying a property. Now, I don't know how many properties a viewer particularly has bought, but you need to remember the biggest thing, because it's such a large transaction, you don't want to bind yourself to something where you're not sure if you're going to be able to perform. That's why OTPs for properties, which is an offer to purchase, are always made subject. What does that mean? Made subject is a suspensive condition. Suspensive condition, what does that mean? I've got a contract. I go to you and I tell you I want to buy the property, but I only want to buy it if the bank gives him money. If the bank doesn't give me money, don't want to buy it anymore. That's a suspensive condition, or an example of one at least. So that's kind of where you want to go with these kind of contracts, because it's such a big transaction. Last thing you want, some auction properties as an example, sheriff's auctions particularly, when you go there, you don't have a choice to say, oh, but only if the bank gives me money. When you go there, you bind yourself. So just know that different sales are dealt with differently. Normally, private sales have a big section there saying bond finance or suspensive conditions or whatever the case is. Look at that. Make sure that that suspensive condition suits you. Look at everything. What is the bond amount for? So what is it subject to? Are you going to get 100%, 90%, 80% of the value of the purchase price? What are you looking for? Also, what interest rate do you want to come out with? What if you get a ridiculous interest rate for exactly the amount that you're looking for, but it's not feasible for you to take it? You need to make sure that in the contract, it at least stipulates that it's whatever to your satisfaction, an interest rate that actually works for you, or whatever the case is. So suspensive conditions, very important. You can also do suspensive conditions on the condition of the property. So for example, if you're in a rush to make an offer, but you haven't gotten a property inspector out yet to view the property, you can make it subject to a positive report by that property inspector. So just bear that in mind. That's just something to factor in. Other things, OTP. So red flag number 4, when is this offer subject to this person accepting other offers? Just make sure that if you're submitting this offer, you know whether the seller, for example, has other offers on the table somewhere along the line, and he's putting yours second. There should be something in the contract that specifically deals with that. So just factor that in. In my mind, Chuma, unless you can think of anything else, in my mind, those are kind of the biggest entry-level risks I normally see when people enter into these type of contracts, because they don't totally understand it. Most of the other stuff is intuitive. I suppose maybe red flag number 5 is the payment of costs. Who is actually liable to pay certain expenses? The standard is purchaser pays transfer duty, purchaser pays transfer costs. That means purchaser pays the attorneys to move the property and pay SARS to allow the property to be moved. Seller would normally pay their own costs, so they would make sure the rates or the municipal debt is up to date. They'd make sure the levies are up to date, and they would cancel their bond over the property. So that's also something to look out for. Auctions, for example, you as a purchaser may land up having to pay the guy's outstanding municipal debt. So again, read those clauses so you make sure that you know what you're in for, bearing in mind that the banks rarely finance these additional costs. So even if you get 100% bond, you need to know what you're in for the rest of, from a cash flow perspective. I think that's it. Nick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, no, look, you've touched a lot of bases. The only thing I want to, just accentuate from what you said is, at every aspect of this transaction, and it is one of the biggest transactions that you as a person are going to go through in your lifetime. Make sure that you reach out and get people to assist you on each element of the transaction. We as purchasers and, as people who are not engaged in this every day, you cannot be expected to understand all the intricacies with each little level, to know where a building might be defective or what particular clauses within a contract are important, where you should have suspensive conditions. These are aspects which are dealt with by professionals on an individual basis. We obviously as attorneys, we get a touch of each of the particular areas, but even as attorneys, I'm not going to be able to go to a property and inspect it and give a report with particularity that you would have someone who does it. And a lot of people get into these transactions and they go, oh, well, I don't want to spend the little bit of extra money to get an inspector out there or whatever the case is. And it's exactly what you said earlier. A 4,000 Rand payment now can save you a hell of a lot of money down the road. So make sure you're asking people along the way, people who know what they're talking about, people who specialize, or deal with these particular assets or aspects of the contract as their job, because it can really save you. And I can't tell you how many people get themselves into a lot of trouble in these transactions. These are very big transactions, very permanent transactions. And it can get you into a lot of problems down the road if you don't do those checks at the start before getting into this particular thing. And you don't want to be the guy at the end of the day who's got into this transaction. You're going to end up losing this property, for a fraction of what you bought it for, and really be in a worse position, for something that really should put you in a good position at the end of the day. Everyone buys property with the idea that they're going to put themselves in a stronger, better position at the end of the day. And it can be a massive liability. So make sure you're talking to the right people, get the right advice all the way through. Even if it costs a little bit, that little bit in the front is gonna save you a lot of heartache down the road.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, guys. That does actually give a lot of information, at least on the basis of just an entry level as to what to look out for and some of the dangers of OTPs and purchasing that property for the first, second, or third time, because experiences are never the same. So just because you've done it one time doesn't mean that, let me just jump in and do it over again, because people think that, I've bought a property before, I know what this process looks like. But like every OTP, just do an OTP review, get somebody involved, and then take it from there. So thank you for